The charity was hiding a silent crime. A city's charity hides a siphon, and one stubborn witness won't blink. What begins as a missing dollar unravels a quiet machine that feeds on trust. He stood at the curb with a paper map he did not trust, a habit inherited from inspections that taught him to doubt fresh paint and smiling foremen. Trent Mallory tracked addresses like a quiet metronome, while the city pressed its palm against his ribs. He had quit the department after a roof fell and the report vanished, leaving him with a scar above the brow and the kind of insomnia that counts sirens. Now he watched a brick warehouse where a non-profit mailed miracles and invoices to the same list. The tips at a child support fund had turned into a siphon, slick and invisible, redirecting tiny sums from tired hands. He believed in tiny sums because tiny sums drown slowly. He believed in ledgers because ledgers never lie unless told to. A bus released air. Light smeared the windows into coins that refused to stack. He timed deliveries, recorded plates, logged a van that stopped twice without unloading, and wrote his notes in a pocket spiral because paper resists edits. Noelle Park should have been home by now. She answered calls from single mothers and kept folders arranged by color: blue for arrears, green for hope, red for appeals. She had asked him for help without admitting she had asked, dropping a folder at the diner and leaving before the coffee cooled. Inside the folder sat copies of receipts that did not match bank totals, like shoes that fit until a hill. He compared names to parcels, traced parcels to a mailbox store, traced that to a private box under a shell contractor, and found that contractor bidding on city jobs. He knew the shape of graft. He knew the smell of fresh drywall spread over a leak. He did not know why Noelle risked her job. He wanted to trust the folder more than the tip, because paper carries weight. He crossed to the warehouse door, pressed the buzzer, and pretended to be looking for volunteer hours. The guard checked a list that did not have his name. The guard asked him to come back with an email. He thanked the guard. He walked away slowly, counting cameras. He found 3 visible and 1 black dome with a lazy blink. He marked a blind corner near a dumpster where the concrete stained like coffee. He did not plan to trespass. He planned to listen. Listening had saved him when a stair nosing moved under his boot, and the floor sighed. He waited until dusk wrapped the alley in a patient sweater. He lifted the lid of the dumpster and smelled cardboard and citrus cleaner. He did not climb in. He looked for envelopes shed by hurried hands, and found one with a smear of red stamp ink. It held a receipt for a payout to a name he had circled in pencil. He photographed it and returned the envelope to its paper cousins. He believed in leaving a scene tidier than he found it, a superstition from a childhood spent in rentals with strict landlords. He called Kian Duarte, a night shift clerk who sold copies in silence. Kian confirmed the routing numbers belonged to a bank used by subcontractors that bid low and finish late. The pattern widened like damp plaster. He bought a coffee he did not want from a truck whose menu promised joy. He watched Noelle step out, lock the side door, and tuck her hair into a clip that struggled. She glanced at the alley, saw him, and kept walking as if his face were a streetlight. He followed at a respectful distance past shutters that made the avenue look polite in sleep. She entered a building with a peeling directory, and vanished into a stairwell that smelled of rain and copper. He waited by the mailboxes while the echo of her steps climbed and softened. On the glass pane floated a notice about a broken intercom, and a number for a super named Mitch. He copied the number. He left before the hall decided he belonged. He had learned to leave just before belonging turned into a question. He studied the block again, noticing chipped mortar, sun-faded posters, and a hush that settled between delivery routes. He traced lines on his map with a thumb that shook less than yesterday. Morning brought the kind of blue that deceives asphalt into shining. Trent returned to the nonprofit during open hours, and submitted a volunteer application that listed irrelevant skills. He folded chairs, moved boxes, and practiced the small talk that disarms suspicion. He learned that the director loved ribbon cuttings and preferred checks to stories. He learned that the finance office shared a wall with the pantry, and that laughter passed through drywall thinner than promises. Noelle avoided him in the careful way of a person who needs help without alerting predators. She slid a sticker sheet across a table as if it were a mistake and murmured that a batch had printed with the wrong return address. The stickers led to a suite in a tower with a mirrored lobby where security smiled without teeth. He could see his jacket reflected in 12 directions, the fabric giving up on its dye at the elbows. Kian met him outside with a badge sleeve and a grin that said he liked puzzles. They rode the elevator with vendors and a courier who smelled like rain. The suite door bore the name of a consulting firm that promised compliance. Inside sat desks with monitors that displayed dashboards engineered to soothe. A receptionist asked for their appointment. Kian explained they were there to audit a print job. Bureaucracy fears invoices more than subpoenas. They were waved toward a copy room where pallets winked through shrink wrap. Trent compared barcodes to the sticker sheet and found a trail between the nonprofit and a shell. He felt the old click in his head when pieces decide to be a picture. He photographed logs, scanned a discarded packing list, and noted a delivery window that made an alibi possible. He looked for exits. He kept his voice low, because quiet multiplies time. Kian distracted a floor manager with a jammed printer routine performed like theater. Trent slipped into a side office and found a corkboard with a schedule for street fairs and outreach events. He circled dates in his mind, building a calendar of opportunities to move money under applause. He did not remove anything. He replaced a thumbtack he had tested. He left the office the way he entered, ordinary and unhurried. On the sidewalk, the city felt like a beast that had eaten too quickly. He called the number for Mitch and learned that the super collected rent in a metal box and favored cash. Mitch also did occasional handyman work for the same contractor behind the shell. The line hummed with refrigerator noise. Trent thanked him and promised nothing. He visited the tower's parking garage and noted a spot reserved for a compliance officer whose car wore a church bumper sticker. He respected faith and distrusted slogans. He walked to a diner that sold toast as if it were a cure. Noelle arrived with a messenger bag and the caution of a deer near a road. She sat without greeting. She said the board refused to hear her, and the director had hinted at budget cuts if she insisted on audits. She pushed a flash drive toward him with 2 fingers. He left it on the table and asked her to keep it, a reversal that made sense to frighten people. She pocketed it and slid him a folded paper with 3 names. He recognized one from a roofing collapse that wrote his scar. He paid for coffee and left cash that looked like apology. Outside, the wind tasted like pennies. He told Kian to dig on the church that hosted fundraisers and to check zoning permits for sudden kindness. They divided streets, agreed on a time, and walked in opposite directions to avoid making a shape. He felt the case trying to become a maze. He refused mazes because mazes flatter architects. He studied the block again, noticing chipped mortar, sun-faded posters, and a hush that settled between delivery routes. A bicyclist rolled past slowly, tire whispering against grit. By late week, the pattern had gathered enough threads to hold weight. Trent attended a fundraiser in a basement where folding tables wore bright cloths and the microphone loved feedback. He watched donors write checks with practice size while a slideshow displayed smiling families and bar charts that climbed. He drifted near the kitchen and heard a name that matched his list, spoken with the relief of a bill paid by someone else. He texted Kian a time and a street. They met behind a hardware store that smelled like dusted metal. Kian had traced the shell to a cousin of the contractor, then to a council aide who handled permits after hours. The aide attended this church. The loop tightened without pulling. Trent disliked tight loops because they break quietly. He needed noise. He called the city ethics hotline and recorded the case number in his notebook, trusting paper over clouds. He printed a summary for Noelle that reduced fear to pages. He asked her to hand it to a board member during a public moment. He asked her to ask no one else. He returned to the warehouse the next afternoon with cookies he had bought to match a holiday spirit he did not feel. He waited for the delivery window he had marked and stood by the loading dock with a clipboard borrowed from a volunteer. The van arrived, the same plate he had logged on night 1. 2 men unloaded boxes that felt too light to be food. He signed as if invited and wheeled a stack toward the pantry. He turned left instead of right and rolled into the finance office because doors open for people who push. He set the boxes down and lifted a lid. Inside lay envelopes and bundles secured with elastic bands that had been stretched too many times. He photographed the interior, closed the lid, and returned the boxes to the dock with a smile that said errands. He left the building and circled the block twice to drain attention. He met Noelle at the corner, and gave her a copy of the ethics case number on a sticky note. She slipped it behind her badge and inhaled as if the note had oxygen. Evening brought board members and a local reporter who preferred ribbon to knots. During announcements, Noel stepped to the microphone and thanked the donors with vowels knotted tight. She asked for a brief executive session about discrepancies that could be resolved with transparency. She used the word transparency because it buys time. The director smiled with all teeth. He declared that the organization welcomed scrutiny. He proposed a committee and reached for a motion. Trent waited by the exit with the patience of old paint. Sirens passed outside. He did not count them. He watched the compliance officer from the tower step into the hallway and check his phone. Kian blocked the far door with a cart that suddenly needed arranging. 2 detectives arrived, summoned by a hotline cross-reference and a tip from a permit clerk who disliked the aid. The detectives walked straight to the finance office and asked to see disbursement records. The church bumper sticker car rolled into the lot at that moment, as if the calendar had been rehearsed. The director tried to speak for everyone and failed. Noelle stood with her folders, blue and green and red, and did not shake. The envelopes were opened, the routes mapped, the shell tugged until it lost its name. The aide resigned before the next service. The contractor lost 3 bids and discovered that late work no longer pays. The nonprofit kept its pantry and its soul. Noelle kept her job and gained a door with a working lock. Trent kept his insomnia, but replaced guilt with something almost gentle. He returned to the curb where the case began and folded the paper map until it made a square that fit a pocket. He exhaled through his nose and let the evening rest. He studied the block again, noticing chipped mortar, sun-faded posters, and a hush that settled between delivery routes. He traced lines on his map with a thumb that shook less than yesterday. A pigeon.